Hello everyone. So our next set of discussion will happen on the topic of executive. You are already done with the topic of legislature in the previous video. In case you have not checked that, kindly go through the same. So this is again what I borrowed from your class 11 Indian Constitution at Work, chapter number 4, executive. They have given executive first and legislature later. I have just reversed it for what I thought was more convenient to be done here. Okay. So we understand that yes, these three are the organs of government. They perform the functions of government, maintain law and order, etc., etc. This is what you already understand. Chaliye, firstly, though, we have to understand what is executive. Like we have understood what is legislature. I've already explained you what is legislature. So basically, all the members which are directly or indirectly elected in the parliament, they are called as, and of course, simultaneously for the state legislature, they are called as the legislatures, the one who would be making the laws. Then in the executive, what will happen? So from amongst those people, let's say Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, so these are the elected and the indirectly or the directly elected members. So from amongst them, some of them will form the government, which will get the majority or form a coalition with the majority. So they'll form the government and they will be called as the executive. So basically, it's more about somebody who administers or manage. So at the top of the polity decision making, the authority that you have would be called as the executive in a very, very simple manner. Okay, so similarly, they have given you the example of the government that one body may make the policy, take the policy decisions and significantly decide about the rules and the regulations. The other one would be the charge of implementing. So let's say there is a term that is used for legislature, which is that okay, they make the laws. For executive, that they execute or implement the laws. So the laws which are made by the legislature will be executed or implemented by the executive, and judiciary that will interpret the laws. Interpret the laws is the key. If we have a confusion about what is the clear understanding of this particular provision of law, judiciary can interpret this. Okay, apart of course, this is a way of giving justice by interpreting the law. So that is the whole idea of executive. So the organ of the government that primarily looks after the function of implementation and administration is called as executive. Now, of course, the question would be that what is the function, or let's say the principal functions that they perform. So firstly, though, of course, it would be implementation of laws and policies which are adopted by the legislature. So framing of the policy is done by them. We have seen that in the previous video. Now, how they are known in different countries, that varies actually. For example, some countries have presidents, some countries have chancellors. आपने Germany में सुना होगा chancellor of Germany. So, you know, the executive branch, whenever you hear, you usually get to an idea that it is only about president, prime minister, ministers. No. It also extends to the administrative machinery, which is of civil servants. So that is the whole idea that you have to understand, that when you will get this idea of executive, you will come across two ideas. One is your political executive, another is your permanent executive. When you say political executive, it means the head of the government, the ministers who will be taking charge of everything, and the ones who are taking charge of the day-to-day administration, the bureaucrats, the civil servants, they are called as the permanent executive. Why do we call them the permanent executive? Simple है क्योंकि see, these political executive यानी ministers, they are elected. You elect them, right? But they are selected. They give an examination which you are trying to appear for and get selected. So they are selected on the basis of their merit. So they will have the job till the end of their tenure. Of course, if some unfortunate incident happens in between, natural or something which they have done, that is a different thing. But otherwise, they will have a tenure till the end of their age and whatever is the requirement there. बट पॉलिटिकली क्या हो जाएगा, इलेक्टेड है, तो इनका हर 5 साल में मैक्सिमम जो है वो चेंजेस होते जाएंगे. ठीक है, therefore they are not permanent. So now we have to understand about the different kinds of executive, because every country have a different kind of system. ठीक है, they will not have the same kind of executive. For example, US में you would have heard about president, England में you would have heard about the queen. ठीक है, although kind of the powers and the functions जो है, let's say even if we say president also, so in US and India we both have president, but we have a very different kind of system that exists this context. So you have to also see there's a Queen of England. So the powers of the Queen of England are very different from, let's say, the King of Bhutan. Then India and France, they both have prime ministers, but their roles are very different from each other. So the whole idea is that even if you see the same names or the designations like president or prime minister, etc., the functions are very different, the way they perform. So of course we will have to understand about the different kinds of systems. Now before we go through this paragraph, it is very much advisable that we see this chart. Once we understand this chart, everything written here, in this page will be very, very clear to us. So types of executive, the first one is on the basis of the system based on the principle of collective leadership. Collective leadership और यहाँ क्या है individual leadership. In the collective leadership, you will have, like here, not one person will only be the leader, it will be a group of people who would act as the leader here or give that leadership. So within this, you have two systems, parliamentary and semi-presidential. Within the individual leadership, you have the presidential system. What are some of the characteristic features of the parliamentary system? These are just broad in structure. As I have told you, we will have a separate session on parliamentary and presidential, and we will do that in greater detail. So parliamentary, the head of the government here is usually known as the prime minister. Please notice that head of the government, not head of the state. Now you know the concept of state and government. So head of the government is known as prime minister. यहाँ पर head of the state is president. Here also the head of the state has different designations, so we'll come to that later. Prime Minister is the leader of the majority party in the legislature, that you know. Prime Minister is accountable to the legislature because we have a group leadership being talked about, and the head of the state in the parliamentary system may be a monarch if that is a constitutional monarchy, or a president if that's a parliamentary republic, like in India. And both of these, either constitutional monarchy or parliamentary republic, here we have the ceremonial executive. Ceremonial, or the other words if you say so, just nominal. So they are just there at the position for the namesake. The real power lies with this head of the government, which you call as prime minister. Of course, the best example is India, so you just take this example. Then in the presidential system, president is the head of the state, and the president only is the head of the government also. Therefore, you see this name presidential system because it is what dominates. The president is usually directly elected by the people. Okay, for example, USA में. But here what is happening? It is indirect election. Okay, India में we have the elected head, president, but indirectly elected. And the president is not accountable for the legislature. But parliamentary system का major concept is that executive is responsible to the legislature. What is meant by being responsible? हम तब देखेंगे when we will talk on the topic of parliamentary and presidential system. Next is semi-presidential. So it will of course include like some features of the presidential and some of the parliamentary. That's why it is partial in nature. So it will have the president as the head of the state and the prime minister as the head of the government, like the different systems. And here the PM and the council are responsible to the legislature. So some features are of parliamentary and some are of presidential. If you have understood this chart, now let's get back to certain examples in the different countries. So firstly, let's say talking about the USA. So it has a presidential system. So executive powers किसके हाथ में है? President के हाथ में. Canada में किस टाइप की democracy है? Parliamentary democracy. And Canada also has a constitutional monarchy, जहाँ पर आप queen जो है is the former chief of head and prime minister is the head of government. France में कैसा system है? President and prime minister are part of the semi-presidential system. So you get one example here, that is of France. ये US हो गया, ये इंडिया हो गया. ठीक है? These are just one set of examples. Then France में ही the president appoints the prime minister and the ministers, but cannot dismiss them because they are responsible to the parliament. Japan में what kind of a system is there? Parliamentary system. Emperor would be the head and prime minister would be the head of government. Italy may be parliamentary system with president as the former head, prime minister as the head of government. Russia is another example of semi-presidential system where president is head of state and prime minister is appointed by president is the government head. Germany में parliamentary system, president is ceremonial head and chancellor is head of government. जहाँ हम PM बोलते हैं वो chancellor बोलते हैं. So presidential system में president is the head of state and government both, and of course the office is very powerful. US, Brazil and most nations in Latin America are using the presidential. Okay, so this is just example of the semi-presidential executive in Sri Lanka. You read it for yourself. Parliamentary में what will happen? As we have seen, the real power lies in the hands of whom? The head of the government, which is the real executive. So you will come across these terms. ठीक है, जब हम parliamentary presidential topic करेंगे, you will come across these terms like real executive, which is your prime minister, which is your head of government. I'm talking about India. And a nominal executive, which is just for the namesake, that is president, and that is head of state. Okay, so this is one example of India and the parliamentary system that we have adopted. Most of the parliamentary systems will have either a president or a monarch. जो उस table में लिखा हुआ था, that is what they have given. They have given you examples. Semi-presidential का examples भी दिया हुआ है, and they have given you how it functions. The same thing that they have given in this table, they have tried to summarize in the paragraph also. Now we have to see the details in the case of India. So how does this parliamentary executive happens in India? So of course, जब हम colonial rule में थे and the constitution was being written, we already have the experience of how the parliamentary system works because we were under the control of Britain and Britain follows the parliamentary system. However, what is to be noticed is that the kind of parliamentary system being practiced in India and Britain are two very different concepts, but the core idea of the parliamentary system remains same in both the cases. So under the Acts of 1919 or 1935, we did have the experience of the parliamentary system, and it was noticed that here, because the system says that the executive can be effectively controlled by the legislature, that is people's representative. What are the mechanisms used by the legislature to control the executive? You have just checked in the previous lecture of legislature, so you know that now. So therefore the constitution makers इंश्योर करना चाहते थे इस चीज को कि जो गवर्नमेंट है वो इतनी सेंसिटिव रहे टू द पीपल एंड देयर एक्सपेक्टेशंस एंड देयरफॉर वो रिस्पॉन्सिबल और अकाउंटेबल रहनी चाहिए. So we should adopt a system wherein the executive or let's say the people in the government would be responsible to the people's representative, that is legislature. That is what is called as executive is responsible to the legislature. However, you have noticed that in the presidential system, what is the case? The executive is not answerable or accountable to the legislature. So in India, such kind of system at least was not feasible while the constitution was being written based on the conditions that was existing in the country. So of course, see, this was the other alternative that we have had, but this kind of a system puts much emphasis on the president as the main source of power. Everything lies in the hand of the president. So of course there was so much of danger of personality cult, especially the kind of situation India was in then, because हमें तो freedom चाहिए था. हमें इतने after 200 years long rule, we wanted freedom and we wanted democracy. Such kind of a system would have, of course, given greater risk to the country. So the constitution makers did not want to have a kind of this system that the government or the body or the authority in power would be so strong. So they wanted to have a check कि उनको strong बनाना है, but इतना भी नहीं कि personality cult आ जाए. So in parliamentary system, at least we have the mechanism wherein we can make the executive responsible or answerable to the legislature, and we can have the mechanisms of control. Therefore, the constitution adopted the parliamentary system of executive for the government, national level के लिए भी, state level के लिए भी. So the same system of parliamentary government is followed at central level and the state level. So we have a formal head of the state, जो मैंने आपको बोला nominal head, that is president, and prime minister and the council of ministers at the national level who will actually run the government. State में same thing will go, president की जगह governor, and in the place of prime minister you will have chief minister. Council of minister remains the same. So we will discuss all of these in detail जब हम executive topic करेंगे. Also the constitution vests the executive power of formally in the president. ठीक है? Why do we say only formally or nominally? Because in reality the president can exercise these powers only with the help of council of ministers. ठीक है, there is a provision on the constitution, you can see here, article 74 clause 1 says that there shall be a council of ministers with the prime minister at the head to aid and advise the president, ठीक है, and he will have to act in accordance with the advice. So even if the president once they can he can ask or she can ask the council of ministers that please reconsider your advice, but after one reconsideration, if the advice remains same by the council of ministers, president is bound to accept it. Okay, so therefore in reality the power lies with whom? This council of ministers, which is headed by the prime minister. And if you even talk about, let's say, the further pointers, let's say about how the president is elected, so we will have a separate chapter on it. So 5 years ka election hai, but of course it's not a direct election, it is indirect election. So here you have an electoral college. College is like a grouping which will help in the election of the president. So the elected MLAs and MPs help in doing that. Who exactly are the ones responsible for electing the president? We will see in the topic of president. And that happens in accordance with the principle of proportional representation with single transferable vote. I have already explained you proportional representation. I have told you that when we will discuss these topics, I will explain in detail what is this single transferable vote. How does the removal of president can happen? So parliament is helping in doing that, and that can happen only by following the procedure for impeachment. So basically impeachment is a term which denotes the removal of president. Now this requires a special kind of a majority. What is exactly special majority, what is simple majority, etc. I'll discuss in the coming lecture so that I give you a whole list of that. And there is just one ground of impeachment, which is violation of the constitution. So we have seen that, okay, president is the formal head. President has different powers: executive, legislative, judicial, emergency powers, etc. But they are used by the president only on the advice of the council of ministers. Prime minister and the council of ministers need to, of course, have the majority in the legislature, and they are called as the real executive. If you talk about some of the discretionary powers, which means here we have written that they are exercised with the help of only on the advice of the council of ministers. Does that mean that president can never exercise any discretionary power, or discretionary matlab based on his or her own will and not on the basis of advice of the minister? So no, we do call it as nominal head, but ऐसा भी नहीं है कि हम बिल्कुल ही power नहीं देंगे. We do give the power. So there are certain situations wherein the president can only act in discretion. अपने मर्जी से वो काम कर सकते हैं. So constitutionally, the president has a right to be informed of all the important matters and deliberations of the council of ministers. कि council of ministers के जो भी matters and deliberations हैं, उनका जानने का अधिकार, the president has a right to be informed about it via the constitution. So prime minister की मजबूरी है, is obliged to furnish all the information which the president might ask for. Also, the president often writes to the prime minister and can express his views on the matters which are related to the country. Then there are at least 3 situations wherein easily the president can exercise the power in discretion. Firstly, sending back the advice given by council of ministers for reconsideration, even though it can happen only once. Okay, but still that once is there. So in this case, the president acts on the discretion that I want to ask the council of ministers that please go for reconsideration, or I don't want to ask. That is depending on the president. If the president thinks that the advice has certain flaws or some legal lacuna and it is not in the good interest of the country, president can definitely ask the council, please reconsider your decision. But the issue is that council may or may not reconsider and may send back the same advice. So in the second instance, the president will be bound to consider that advice only which was given by the council of ministers. लेकिन at least in the first instance, जहाँ पर वो अपने discretion में काम कर सकते हैं. Second situation, president has a veto power. Veto power means that you're using this power to keep something on hold or to reject it. So that can be used to withhold or refuse to give assent. Refusal या withhold मतलब I am not accepting the bill. Money bill में थोड़ा special criteria होता है, so that we will see later. But otherwise, if the parliament passes a bill, and we have seen point in the previous video that a bill will become a law only when it receives president's assent or final, you would say, approval after passing through all the stages. So, if the president wants accept the money bill, to the other bills the president can reject that. Every bill has to go to the president finally to become a law, and president can also send back the bill to the parliament that you please reconsider it. However, we call this limited veto power because if the parliament passes the same bill again and sends it back to the president, then the president has to give the assent. So again, in the first instance only, the discretionary power can be used. But there is one catch here, and this is a prelims potential pointer, that there is no mention in the constitution about the time limit within which the president must send the bill back for reconsideration. So if the president wants, can keep the bill pending for whatsoever time. There is no time limit for that. And therefore it is called as pocket veto. There are different kinds of veto which we'll do when we do the topic in detail. Pocket veto means I'm keeping the power in my pocket, bill in my pocket, and I'm not taking any decision. Not sending the back, not accepting it, not rejecting it, not doing anything. Okay. Third kind of situation for discretion, political situation से related आता है. For example, formally because the appointing authority for the prime minister is president. So let's say in a parliamentary system, when a leader gets a majority party support in Lok Sabha, उन्हीं को prime minister बना दिया जाएगा. ठीक है. So there is no question of discretion. Whosoever gets the majority will become the prime minister. But let's say after an election, there is no leader who has got a clear majority, and they are not even able to forge alliances or make alliances. Okay? And 2-3 leaders from different parties will claim that I am getting the support of majority and I want to be the prime minister. So in such kind of a chaotic situation, the power lies with the president to decide who will be the prime minister, and then president will ask that person that you prove your majority. Okay? So all of these things again, as I told, हम detail में देखेंगे. Examples इन्होंने दिए हुए हैं, so you just go through it. So इस तरीके के situation में where there is no clear-cut majority, the situations demand presidential intervention. या तो गवर्नमेंट बनाने के लिए, या फिर वही बात है, प्राइम मिनिस्टर सजेस्ट president in some other cases that okay we have to dissolve the Lok Sabha because we do not have the majority, etc. etc. So the presidential discretion in this case is related to the political conditions here. And otherwise we have seen it as a formal power holder, ceremonial head, etc. And the Council of Ministers is dependent on the support of majority in the legislature. So that is another key feature of the parliamentary system, that they are accountable, responsible to them. So the Council of Ministers may be removed at any time, right? And a new Council of Ministers will have to be put in place. So see, the whole idea is, like, you know what the question they have given is, if you notice on this question, why we need a president? Because we are telling the president is a formal power holder and a ceremonial head only. So why do you need that? So that is the answer. That here the Council of Ministers in the kind of parliamentary system requires the majority. So if they do not get the majority, they can be removed anytime. If such a situation happens, who will be the head? Because the government will collapse. Not getting any majority means the government will collapse. So, which means the head of the government will also collapse. Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, nothing will exist. So, if this is not having, you need to have certain backups. So, at least a head of the state will be there, who will be empowered to appoint the Prime Minister, and the further steps can be taken on. Therefore, the President has a role to play here. Then again, there is a section on the Vice President of India, because that also comes in the executive only. So vice president is elected for 5 years. Election is similar to president. We will have a chapter on it later. Don't worry about it. बस एक डिफरेंस क्या है that the members of the state legislature are not part of the electoral college. ठीक है, वाइस प्रेसिडेंट का पोस्ट क्योंकि प्रेसिडेंट जितना नहीं है ना, तो प्रेसिडेंट के केस में वी हैव द एमएलएज आल्सो प्लेइंग अ रोल इन द इलेक्शन, बट वाइस प्रेसिडेंट में स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर के मेंबर्स डू नॉट प्ले अ रोल. How does the removal happen? By a resolution of Rajya Sabha passed by a majority and agreed by Lok Sabha. The reason that why does it happen only in Rajya Sabha? I have told you in the previous lecture about it, and I told you that I'll give the reason when that topic comes. Because the Vice President of India acts as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Ex officio matlab by virtue of that office. Matlab because somebody becomes a vice president, the person will automatically become the ex officio chair. So I mean the chairman of Rajya Sabha. सो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट का जो भी चीज होता है वो राज्यसभा से ही रिलेटेड होता है. एंड ऑल्सो they take over the president of office if there is, let's say, vacancy in the office of president, or the president has died or resigned or removed, etc. So vice president in that case acts as the president. Next set of executive is about the prime minister and the council of ministers. So you understand that Prime Minister being the head of the government, of course, that office is the most significant, okay? Because, and also the president has to exercise the power only on the advice of the Council of Ministers. COM is headed by the Prime Minister. Therefore, as head of the Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister becomes the most important functionary of the government. In the parliamentary form of executive, it is very essential that the Prime Minister has the support of majority, which we have just seen. And this support also makes the Prime Minister powerful. Of course, anybody who is getting the majority will be confident of the further power, so that is pretty obvious. And if the majority will be lost, the Prime Minister will also lose the office. Okay. So this is what they have talked about. Let's say the situation in India, that after independence for many years, there was one party dominance, Congress party, which used to have the majority. And the leader of that party would become the Prime Minister. But since 1989, there have been occasions when no party had majority in Lok Sabha. The various political parties started to form the coalition, and we started to have a system in the coalition that uh, the different parties involved in coalition, they will choose one leader, they will decide for one leader who would become the prime minister. Then the Prime Minister will decide that who will be the ministers in the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister will allocate the ranks and portfolios to the minister. कि किसको कौन सी ministry मिलनी है, who will take charge of what. Then also the ministers are given the different ranks. See, this question has come in this year prelims 2022 में इससे related a question आया हुआ है. Just check the paper. So cabinet minister, minister of state और deputy minister. Similarly, chief minister state के केस में same चीजें होती हैं, ठीक है. Very important feature of parliamentary system is that the executive, which is prime minister and ministers, have to be the members of parliament. So executive is part of the legislature, or basically if you say so, the ministers are also the members. They have to be the members. However, if someone becomes a minister or a prime minister without being a MP, that is also possible, but that is possible only for 6 months. So as I just said, that ministers are members of the legislature. That is a mandatory criteria. But they can not be the member for 6 months. So for 6 months, they have the permission to be minister or prime minister. But within 6 months, they have to get elected to the parliament. Otherwise, उनका वो office चला जाएगा. साइज की जो बात होती है काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स की, इस पर भी क्वेश्चन था 2022 में. बिफोर द 91st अमेंडमेंट एक्ट, साइज जो है वो डिपेंडेंट ऑन द टाइम एंड द सिचुएशन एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट. सो दे यूज्ड टू हैव वेरी लार्ज काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स आल्सो. बाद में लेकिन इस चीज को अमेंडमेंट एक्ट से डिसाइड कर दिया गया, फिक्स कर दिया गया दैट इट विल नॉट एक्सीड 15% ऑफ द टोटल मेंबर ऑफ द हाउस और द स्टेट असेंबली जो भी रहेगा. ठीक है. So they are collectively responsible to Lok Sabha. We have seen this in the powers of Lok Sabha in the chapter on legislature. So a ministry which loses confidence of Lok Sabha अगर लोकसभा में उनको कॉन्फिडेंस यानी मेजॉरिटी नहीं मिल रही है, सपोज सहमति नहीं मिल रही है, तो दे हैव टू रिजाइन। सो मिनिस्ट्री जो है वो एक एग्जीक्यूटिव कमिटी ही है पार्लियामेंट की, एंड इट कलेक्टिवली गवर्न्स ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ पार्लियामेंट। कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी की जो बात हो गई, मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि वन मिनिस्टर विल रिजाइन, नो, द होल काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स अलोंग विद द प्राइम मिनिस्टर विल रिजाइन. So it is about solidarity of the cabinet that we stand together. So if there is a vote of no confidence, even against a single minister, that okay, we do not have trust in this minister, but it will lead to the resignation of the whole council of ministers. Also, if a minister does not agree with a policy of the decision or the cabinet's decision, उनको या तो फिर resign करना पड़ेगा या decision मानना होगा. You cannot go against the party. ठीक है, जिस जहाँ से आप elected हैं, या फिर आप पार्टी छोड़ दो, either you leave the party or you just stick to what they are telling. So it is binding. Of course, the position of prime minister is very important. Council of minister cannot exist without prime minister. ठीक है, head जो है वो prime minister ही होने हैं. डेथ और रेजिग्नेशन ऑफ प्राइम मिनिस्टर अगर हो जाता है, so that will result in the dissolution of council of ministers. But if any other minister dies or resigns, it will not lead to the whole decline of the council of ministers. Only that vacancy for that particular minister would be created. But if prime minister dies or resigns, then the whole council of ministers will collapse. So therefore, prime minister acts as link between council of minister and president, or let's say the parliament on the other hand. ठीक है, therefore पंडित नेहरू को जो है उन्होंने पोस्ट ऑफ प्राइम मिनिस्टर को कहा linchpin of the government, a link between that. Also, it is the constitutional obligation of the prime minister कि उनको president को सारी बातें जो है वो बतानी है, जो भी president could ask for. These points we have already seen earlier, right? How does the prime minister get all of these powers? What are the sources of the power of prime minister? Control over the council of minister, leadership of Lok Sabha, command over the ब्यूरोक्रेटिक मशीन, मीडिया का एक्सेस होना, पर्सनालिटीज प्रोजेक्शन, एक चेहरे के नाम पे इलेक्शन लड़ा जाता है, नेशनल लीडर की तरह प्रेजेंट होना इन दी इंटरनेशनल समिट एक्सेट्रा. So they are very important position whenever a single political party has secured majority. But again, as we have seen, since 1989 there was a system of this coalition government. So of course, यहाँ पे it is very important to see if all the parties in the coalition are agree to have the same leader as the prime minister or not. They might not then be able to be in the full term, because बीच में if they lose the confidence, the whole government will collapse. ठीक है? So they have talked here about the coalition kind of a system. इससे क्या हो रहा है कि एक तो डिस्क्रिशनरी रोल बढ़ेगा ऑफ द प्रेसिडेंट इफ देयर विल बी नो क्लियर कट प्राइम मिनिस्टर कैंडिडेट, तो हु वुड बी सिलेक्टेड, इसमें प्रेसिडेंट का रोल बढ़ेगा. देन जो कोलिजन नेचर है, दिस इज नेसेसिटेटेड मच मोर कंसल्टेशन बिटवीन द पॉलिटिकल पार्टनर्स. दे कैन नॉट जस्ट गो फॉर एनी रैंडम प्राइम मिनिस्ट्रियल अथॉरिटी, दे वुड कंसल्ट ऑन दैट. Also, it will result in the restrictions on prerogatives of the prime minister, कि इजीली वो किसी को भी मिनिस्टर बना लेंगे, उनका रैंक पोर्टफोलियो डिसाइड कर लेंगे. इट विल नॉट इजीली हैपन. Even the policies and the programs of government cannot be decided by the prime minister alone. They will have to take care of all the coalition partners into consideration. ठीक है, सारा कुछ जो है वो बहुत negotiation के साथ होगा. So in this coalition system, the major factor would be that prime minister will have to act more as a negotiator, right? Having consensus from everybody around and not just a leader of the government that I'm taking one-sided decision. Similarly, in the state level, president का काम would be done by the governor, prime minister का काम would be done by the chief minister. ठीक है? So that we will anyway see when we do those topics. This was all about the discussion on the political executive, जो आपको मैंने सारा ministers और ये सब समझा दिया. Now you will have the discussion on the permanent executive, which I have explained, that is your bureaucracy. So यहाँ पर आपके एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव मशीनरी में ये लोग होंगे जिनको आप बोलते हो सिविल सर्विस के जो हैं मेंबर्स हैं. यहाँ पे you will have the officers who are the permanent employee of the government, therefore they are called as permanent executive, and they are assigned the task of assisting the ministers in making the policies, implementation of policies, etc. And it is a very important thing because the administrative officers जो हैं They cannot act in violation of the policies adopted by the legislature. So it is very important that we have this professional administrative system, which is, you know, uh, taking charge of all the policies, implementation, etc. And they are made politically accountable also. You must have heard this point that the civil servants are not supposed to incline towards one political party. So they are expected to be politically neutral. Why do we say so? Because the bureaucracy will not take any political position on policy matters. See, your I mean any bureaucrat term will be till the end of their service. जो भी उनका tenure होगा, ठीक है, retirement के time तक. In this period, let's say 30, 35 or whatever number of years, you will have every 5 years in a normal situation the change in parties, right? So your political executive will keep on changing, your ministers will keep on changing, but those bureaucrats will continue to serve till the retirement time. So therefore, if you politically become inclined towards one particular party, you would not be able to do justice to the people. You will not be able to serve the people the way you are expected to. And therefore, it is said कि आपको neutral होना चाहिए. ठीक है? So this is an important point. पार्टी जो है वो चेंज होती रहेगी, लेकिन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव मशीनरी की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी क्या है? Whatever government is into the functioning or less into the power, your work is only to draft the policy and help in the implementation of the policy. So you only take care of this. Of course, we have a complex system. For example, we have all India services. We have 3 all India services. You name them in the comment section in case you know that. Otherwise, also हम detail में करेंगे आगे इसको. Then you have the central services. You have the state services. For that, UPSC is the body, tasked of conducting the process of recruitment for the civil services for the government of India. Similarly, you will have the State Public Services Commission for different states. Members are appointed for a fixed term. Removal, subjection, etc. जो है वो judges of Supreme Court की तरह ही होता है. कैसे entire process happens? जब हम UPSC and SPSC करेंगे in the constitutional body, we will do that. Definitely for the recruitment, efficiency and merit are important. तभी bureaucrats are selected. But constitution also ensures that we represent all the sections of the society into this public bureaucracy. So we have the reservation system, okay? And therefore bureaucracy would be more representative, and we will try to have this social inequality not being an obstruction in the recruitment to the civil service. This is the classification. So all India services, you have administrative, you have police, you also have the forest services. Central may you have foreign, custom, IRS, etc. State may you have the other services. So these people who are selected for the administration, of course, they are the backbone. जैसे आपने district में collector सुना है, ठीक है? वो IAS officer होते हैं, and their officer is governed by the service conditions, which is led by the central government. IAS और IPS officer is assigned to a particular state, जहाँ पे वो state के accordance में जो है supervision में काम करेंगे, but they are appointed by the government. That is why they are called as all India services. मतलब they are appointed by the center, but they will work under the supervision of different states where they are posted. Okay? So the key administrative officers are under the supervision and control of the central government, but they will work in accordance with the states that they will be posted. Then you will have the different state officers also, जो State Public Service Commission द्वारा appoint किए जाएंगे. They are very important instrument because they take care of the welfare policies जो लोगों के लिए बनी होती हैं, ठीक है? हाँ, of course the issue is that bureaucracy में when people come, they consider themselves too important. They forget that they are actually made present there for the ordinary citizens. So people are very much afraid of approaching an officer. Okay? So we have to ensure that in a democratically elected system, these problems should be effectively handled. And political interference is also one issue which bureaucracy faces. So they have to manage accordingly. Some goes into the mean of corruption for their own personal advantage. Some still stick to their own values and continue like that. So we have different kinds of examples in the system. Okay. So it is very important that enough provisions are not there to ensure the accountability of to the bureaucracy of the citizen. क्योंकि इस तरह में क्या हो जाता है कि I think it should be wrong. It should be asked there, not नहीं होना चाहिए. but that is okay. Galti se I think they have given the state. It is about actually making these efficient systems so that bureaucracy जो है लोगों को serve actual in real sense it would do. For example, let's say your measures like RTI etc. ठीक है? So these are the things यहाँ पे public also gets the right to information, and whatever the thing they might have not got the information for, they can easily use bureaucracy to be more responsive, or you would say expect them to be more responsive and accountable towards the general public. So these are the exercises. Again, as I recommended in the legislature, I would say that you should attempt these questions here also. Read the chapter thoroughly, and of course, we will see the details of every chapter. Like we will combine president and governor so that we see the similarities, dissimilarities. We'll combine prime minister and council of ministers. We will combine union council of ministers and state council of ministers. ठीक है? और फिर civil services पे एक अलग chapter है. Then you have separate chapters on bureaucracy also, like UPSC, SPSC. तो वो सब हम देखेंगे जब वो टॉपिक्स आएंगे. ठीक है? So see you guys in the next video on judiciary. Take care. Bye bye.